This is one of my favorite times of the year. Football is great. I love football. It is top 2 of the things in my life that are important to me. Top 3, somewhere in there. But football roster management might be my true love. The building, the anticipation, the projections, trying to put the puzzle pieces together to create the magic on Saturdays in the fall. And we are full in the smack dab middle of roster management season, which is why Nate Bauer, it's so pivotal that he's here. And it's so important that we have this conversation. But to be clear, off the top of the bat, we're a man down today because Fitz has the flu or some version of a virus, and Nate is playing injured, who also, if you watched our video yesterday on Tom Allen and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, working through some stuff. So it is adversity time, and I love that you're playing through injury, Nate. So welcome to the show. I wanted to set that up so everyone gives you the grace that the internet and YouTube can provide, which is what it is. Take it or leave it. Nate, how are you in that context doing today?
Yeah, I think I'm mentally clear. While I speak, and apologies in advance to everyone, I'm going to have some issues speaking and not coughing, but we're going to give it a go. We're going to see what happens.
Sorry, I was distracted by all those things, and then the first thing is Nate and T. Franco moronic goons. Of course, yes. Welcome to the internet.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, thank
always
you so
appreciate
much for watching. That's nice.
Yeah, I will be as moronic as I possibly can be. I will give you as much of what you want here as possible. So let's start out, Nate, with a continuation of the conversation that we had yesterday. So we talked about the decision, the process, the outcome of Tom Allen choosing to leave Penn State's defensive coordinator position for Clemson. So now let's get into what is next for Penn State. It is January 14th. Penn State's deep run into the college football playoff, just like in the NFL. If and when you have to replace important coordinators, it is a late in the game process to do those things just now. It's a great problem to have, but it is a part of the situation where Penn State is doing this later than they normally would in any given season previously. So what's the timeline and your understanding of what's going on in Penn State's defensive coordinator search, knowing that this information came out Sunday night, Monday, and here we are Tuesday, kind of in the full swing of it?
Obviously, they want to work fast. They want to get through this as quickly as possible. I am hesitant. Look, you hear and see a lot of things, sometimes that align, sometimes that don't, with things that I hear, right? And so for me, there's a little bit of difficulty of corresponding the two, right? Because I don't hear everything, obviously, right? I'm getting information from a variety of places, but that doesn't mean that those places are the only sources of information that exist. And so a lot of this is just kind of hearing my side of things, which is not that a hire is imminent in any way, versus other people that, might say that it is. And so, I think that these things traditionally, it has not been a situation that I've covered in James Franklin's career where it was just an automatic crowning of someone.
Right. There were candidates in place, but there was a process done in order to make that hire happen. So it's not necessarily there was a plan and then execute the plan immediately. Is that fair, or am I mischaracterizing what you're saying?
James Franklin reads the entirety of the menu before he orders his meal.
I like that. Because I do that too.
You might see something in the appetizers that he loves. Mm-hmm. And sure, he knows he wants to order that, but that's his process, is he goes front to back. So that is not necessarily to say that it won't be expedited, I think it will. Right? They need to move quickly. But I do think that the timeline has changed some of the dynamics where nobody's, well, first of all the early enrollees are already on campus, right? You're not losing any recruits because of Tom Allen. And I think that was probably the case anyway. I'm not sure that you're losing any transfers because of Tom Allen.
That would be my next question is, does it change the portal recruiting that is still out there in terms of maybe targets being interested? That's one side of it, but what Penn State is interested in targets. There are still, even if you bring in a coordinator that is schematically similar, there are variances and differences. And let's just Tom Allen to Manny Diaz, both 4-2 defensive coordinators. Manny Diaz played more traditionally structured defenses. Tom Allen liked to invert and move safeties around from that nickel position. So you needed different things from that, maybe that one player. So I guess that's kind of in my mind of, does that put any of those things into flux? Just generally in your mind?
No, I think that there is a mold, and James Franklin wants that, and will seek out candidates that fit it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be one for one, but it does mean you're not just going to completely blow up what you've been doing based on the fact. And how do we know this? Because James Franklin said the exact same thing last year when he hired Tom Allen, and he said the exact same things 2 years before that when he hired Manny Diaz. Right there is a loose system in play. I think there's always areas that Franklin would prefer to tweak and get better, and it's not static. It changes from year to year, but it's also not. They have pursued player acquisition has been about a certain brand of defensive football, and I believe fairly strongly that they will look for and hire a candidate that can do that and that can implement that. I do want to address this just because I see it. I think that the Anthony Poindexter conversation is not, it's twofold, right? He is the first thing on the menu, right? Like that's kind of my point, is he's going to be there. He's there for you if the other things, as you read the rest of the menu, are not up to what you want. But also it defies my understanding of how James Franklin operates, that he would simply tap Anthony Poindexter and say, "Oh, you're the guy. We're moving on."
So I guess the interesting thing that there's somebody, who was it here, had a funny line that Beach Wine Guy says, "I've spent too much time on the site lately. Last night I dreamt that I was out to dinner with Nate," which will be a fun experience. Nate is a pleasant guy to have a conversation with. But I fell asleep last night thinking about the Anthony Poindexter situation, and I think it's an unfair reality, maybe, of there is no danger of losing your strength necessarily by getting an external candidate. If you hire from within and promote Anthony Poindexter, you're taking an elite position coach and putting him in a new position. If he's successful, maybe he moves on and becomes a head coach somewhere. If he's not successful and you take a step back because it's his, I don't want to say it's his first time. He's obviously been a defensive coordinator before, but, at this level, these pressures, the things that even Tom Allen didn't do right as a guy who had been a head coach and a coordinator, now you're in a position where you can't really demote him back to safeties coach if in worst case scenario, all things go wrong. So I think it's an interesting position. It's obviously not one to prevent you from hiring him if he is the best possible candidate. But at the same time, it does come with more risk than Tom Allen is here for a year, and the core of what makes your defense great is still in place.
I see this comment, three defensive coordinators in 3 years hired Dex. Dex wants to be a head coach.
Right.
So that doesn't solve your issue. If you're concerned about turnover and you're concerned about, rolling through these guys so quickly, that doesn't fix it. Right. I do think that the Tom Allen situation is along the lines of, like, that was an ideal situation. He just got unlucky. Penn State just got, excuse me. Penn State got a little unlucky that there are family circumstances that are going to draw him away, right? Like if it wasn't Clemson, if it was Southern Cal, for instance, if it was whatever, but Washington, Tom Allen's not leaving Penn State. He's leaving Penn State so he can go to South Carolina and be near the rest of his family. So, I do think guys who don't necessarily have aspirations to be a head coach have a little bit of an appeal, right? If you're James Franklin and you're dealing with this, you've been doing this. Like if you can find a guy who maybe does have head coaching experience, but is comfortable and engaged in a coordinator role, I think that would be fairly appealing as well.
I think that's the most underrated and valuable thing that you can find in football. To find a truly great position or coordinator, position coach, somebody who is the best of the best at what they do in the role that they are, who also have an awareness of wanting to be that and not having the aspiration of being a head coach. I know these things are over time. You can think of, I think of in the NFL, Jim Johnson as a defensive coordinator for the Eagles, Steve Spagnuolo, coming off of that coaching tree. I think one of the biggest mistakes maybe for a lot of guys is they want to be a head coach and maybe their destiny in life is to be the best defensive coordinator, best offensive coordinator in the history of the game. And that is a very important role, but not one that a lot of people who are in this ladder-driven profession generally aspire to be just that. And so if you can find those, I think that is a huge benefit as you kind of outlined, because it's not only is it stability, but then you get to have the best of both worlds, the stability and the genuine mind at the position to generate the best possible outcome with the talent given.
Yeah. I think there's two things I want to add. One, of all the people, right, James Franklin has had quite a bit of success hiring coordinators and has done it a lot at this point, right? Mm-hmm. That is so in terms of people who are practiced at this, James Franklin is one of them. And two, I think that the budget is such that I'm not saying that money isn't a thing. Money's always a thing, but it's going to be lofty. It will be a big spend that that he has the opportunity to go with, right? Pat Kraft, I think, has demonstrated his belief in James Franklin's ownership of the program, hiring coach. Like Pat has said it on the record multiple times that he trusts his head coaches across all sports to hire their coaching staffs. And I think this is one of those situations where it will be, it might not be a blank check, but it's going to be two commas in there for sure. I mean, obviously,
is it to say more than in previous years? And so this conversation all kind of, to me, in my mind, circles back to Jim Knowles. Not that Manny Diaz wasn't an amazing find in the situation given, but career defensive coordinator guy versus guy who is here for 2 years as the head coach in the future, but also the two institutions that were, I think a part of the conversation about wanting Jim Knowles. Are they in an area to make a situation like that happen for Penn State this time?
It's all individual, but I think what has been demonstrated over the last few years is that James Franklin doesn't preclude himself from exploring all the options. And that is the only point here. Is I see a lot of fan sentiment that is in some cases limiting, I think. And to me, it's kind of an outdated, for Penn State's current circumstances, way of thinking about this.
This is, by the way, going back to all of our conversations here on the show, what you were pointing out in these coaching searches before was there is a certain parameter that they have to meet, and these outcomes were not entirely just based on quality of the position, but also this other side. And you're saying now that the other side is more amenable to a situation where Penn State wins a battle for a coordinator it really wants. That's all I was trying to say. I'm not trying to specifically say Penn State's going to hire Jim Knowles away from Ohio State, but more that if there is a battle to be had, Penn State has the firepower to contend and make it a decision.
I think the idea is you identify the guy that you want, and it's usually 2 or 3, right? Yeah. That's the way that the defensive coordinator played out last time, and it's the way the offensive coordinator played out last time. You find the 2 or 3 that you really like, see if they really like you, and then I will say that there are extraneous factors that aren't as front and center as just the salary. It is what's the buyout, right? What do their contracts look like? Do they want to move to this part of the country? Do they there's a number of things that can be deal breakers, even once you've narrowed your list. But ultimately, James Franklin is fairly well practiced and fairly established with a track record of being good at this process.
Okay, so give me 1 second because I found this last comment and it just ruined what I was going to do. But Russman says, rumor is Nick Saban is going to be the next defensive coordinator, which would be hilarious. I just on the outcomes possible of what we just described of maybe former head. I mean, he fits all the narratives, right? A guy who was a former head coach, guy who maybe at this point in his career just wants to be a defensive coordinator, not deal with all the other things. But just from a hilarity standpoint, I just wanted to bring up Nick Saban, defensive coordinator for James Franklin. That would be an all-timer.
I mean, the issue with that is that would preclude him from becoming the commissioner of college football. So
right.
James Franklin would really be in a bind there.
Which
if he had
which one?
Between,
right. Which one would he choose? I have a feeling I know exactly which one he would choose. But this is where we were going next before that comment. So thank you, Russman. That was awesome. I appreciate everybody here in the chat. Of course, if you're watching the show, and you're enjoying Penn State offseason content, you want to know the latest information, first thing is subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You can do that for just $1 right now. Get access for a week. Get all the infotainment you could handle because Nate is incredibly entertaining on the message board, and he gives you all the information you need to know. Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder, Greg Pickle, all of these guys providing great insight and information into what's going on with Penn State right now. But if you're watching the show and you want to hang out with us weekly, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 10 a.m., we're here live. Subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel so you get our updates on these breaking news situations when we post videos. It's going all crazy. So when Penn State hires a defense coordinator, we'll be back with that breaking news as well. If you want to be one of the first people to get that, make sure you subscribe. Now, Big Spirit asked this earlier. Who picked up the check at Antifragile in Beach Wine Guy's dream? Nate. So I ask you, if you guys are at Antifragile, are you picking up the check or how's that working out? And tell us, for people who don't know about Antifragile Brewing Company in downtown State College.
Yeah, it's our spot. Look, Fitz and I are dads. We've got responsibilities. And so there are few opportunities to get out and enjoy the best beer in State College. But when we do have those opportunities, we spend it at Antifragile because it does have the best beer in State College, and it has the best vibe in State College, and it has the best bartenders in State College, and it has the best cheesesteaks in State College. And then also, I don't want to give away the game here, but nobody likes having their ego blown up more than me. And usually Blue White Illustrated folk are there. They're just there. They've
become our spot.
You guys have been so loyal to them and by extension us, and it's been so flattering and awesome, right? Get to mix it up and chat with fans of us and obviously Antifragile, and just the experience has only ever been top notch there, and it will continue to be. And honestly, beyond our presence, which may be an incentive to go there, the incentive of all incentives is that their beer is awesome. It's really good. It's a bunch of variety and just a rotating, right? If This isn't a dig at all. If Coors Light only is your thing, they don't have that. There's no Coors Light there, but there is Great beer across the spectrum, different varieties, and they also make cocktails, which I think is an overlooked part of this. Is they do make specialty cocktails that are really, really good as well. So go.
Yeah, and we've teased this a little bit, but now that Penn State football season is over, I'm going to get more serious about this. We're going to be in some semi-official capacity at Antifragile, where you can come and hang out with us, and we can have some sort of conversation, have some sort of thing is part of our plan. So once we get all that squared away, we'll let you know, and that'll be part of our off season, hopefully to meet and to grow and to know you guys a little bit better. But let's talk about Penn State football again, get into the roster news about what's going on with the team specifically. We haven't had a chance to talk about a lot of these things from the last couple of days, so we're going to do a big recap. And of course, like I had all these graphics ready, and one of them didn't get into the final product, but we do have our transfer portal. So good or bad, Nate, do you want to start positive or negative? Portal in, portal out. Where are we going with our first aspect of Penn State's roster management over the last 4 and now 4.5 days?
What's the negative?
Just generally the portal out, I guess you would say, is a negative generally.
I don't know if Penn State would feel that way. That was flippant of me. I shouldn't have said that. Look, it just doesn't work out sometimes. Sometimes you get guys that they're not up to the level. And sometimes people just need a fresh start, right? There's a combination of factors out there. It's not to dig on a kid for his choice to leave, but I would say this, and I think that this is an important piece of this. Penn State, to this point in the process, has not gotten straight out poached.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. None of the stars. Katron Allen coming back. I don't want to, spoil the surprise of what your returning graphic looks like. But Katron Allen staying means that Katron Allen didn't get poached, right? It means that there weren't other programs who were able to offer a sizable enough package to incentivize leaving over the NFL. And so I think that is a thing that I'm saying right now on January 14th that I don't know if I will be able to say at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. Right? The portal window is closing. I think it's either today or tomorrow for Penn State. And so there could still be some movement there. But for the most part, Penn State has brought in players that they want and seen the exits of guys who could probably use a fresh start, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the name on that list, if Penn State could have a player back, would be Bo Prabula. But I also think internally they understand that he's a guy who wants an opportunity. And if Drew Aller's coming back as the established starter, that likely wasn't going to be at Penn State. If he hadn't beat out Drew Aller in 3 years, it probably wasn't going to happen this spring. And so I think that you make a fair point there, especially given the recruiting they've done at the position since 2022 at quarterback. So portal in. Speaking of poached players, King Mack is back. I wanted to talk about this for about 4 days, so I'm glad we have the conversation here. But Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross at receiver are the most important names, I think, on this list. Low-key TJ Shanahan of the guys I've watched, I'm super excited about him. But I want to know what you think before we get into some of those things about this list of players and its impact on 2025 and its completeness. Like, do you think if this is the end of the influx of players that they have sufficiently reloaded for that 2025 push, which the expectation now, Nate, is that they are competing in the college football playoff at this point. There is there's no curve anymore from what you're saying about the support and the monetary and everything else that's going on behind the scenes. Everything has to be full throttle at this point.
Yeah, the question is receiver, is whether or not those two guys can be the guy. It's also a question of whether Trey Wallace, if he comes back, or Omari Evans, if he comes back, can they be the guy, right? It's pretty front and center, right? The names have been fairly consistent. Yes, they just saw the exits of Mekhi Flowers and Tyler Johnson yesterday, but the names and faces have largely been the same, absent the precision additions that they've made and subtractions in the transfer portal, right? With Julian Fleming, obviously Dante Cephas before that, Mitchell Tinsley, right? There's this track record of trying to bolster that room with a guy. All right, they brought in two. And this is your expertise more than it is mine. And to be honest with you, I'll share this. I get questions, right, surrounding the program, not necessarily internally, of can these guys be the guy? Or can either of these guys, can Devontae Ross, if Trey Wallace isn't the guy?
Right.
And they tried to make him the guy this year, and he had moments where he was the guy. He had moments where he wasn't the guy, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just kind of the bottom line of this is Drew had moments where he wasn't the guy, right? Like that's right. Kind of the reality here. It's not a one-way street. There's shared responsibility throughout. Andy Kotelnicki had moments where he wasn't the guy. Larger point being, can the influx of Ross and Hudson change the dynamic where that room becomes reliable to the point where they present an option that is appealing, right? For Andy Kotelnicki.
Right.
I answered this question the other day, and I think that it's so important because people talk about, will Drew look to the receivers? Drew is following the progressions of the play, right? So when Tyler Warren and Nick Singleton are the first and second options, that's purposeful.
Yes.
There's a reason for that. And so like that is what it needs to be sorted out is if excuse me, if Andy Kotelnicki wants to have the full experience of the offense, and I know that there's questions about the quarterback's ability to run in that equation, but if you want to have the breadth of what this offense can be, what Andy Kotelnicki can do, you need to have the players in place who can execute it. And they decided very clearly by the middle of the season that they were going to ride Nick Singleton, Tyler Warren, and Katron Allen.
Yep. So there is a part of me that needs to. I've been having this conversation in my head of as far as they got with a tight end as their number one target, can you win at the highest level with a tight end as your number one target? And we're going to get into this if we get to the game breakdown. If we don't get to the game breakdown, even though it's almost a week later, we'll do it tomorrow with Greg. So to answer your initial question about the receivers they brought in, they are they're inverse images of each other. Kyron Hudson is a physical possession receiver who has good contested catch numbers, not great contested catch numbers, and good hands. So you put all that together. The concern is, can he separate? That's not any different than Penn State's current situation, but the production and meeting the moment and some of those things, you feel more positive about his mental capacity to meet the moment than you do maybe the current roster. So that's a positive. But then you have a big negative of speed is the most important thing in football. And he doesn't have that. Can he get faster? He's a physically mature player that's been in a Power 4 program. My concern is that he would, just like Mitchell Tinsley, get marginal gains, but not be the guy that's the guy. So if you want a guy that's the guy, I don't think Kyron Hudson right now presents that in his profile. Let's talk about Devontae Ross. Speed is the most important thing in football, but when you're 161 pounds, you are pushing the limit of what is realistic to play football at the highest level. And NFL is the highest level, and then Power 4 football is the next highest level. This is the next level to that. So any weakness you have eventually can be exposed by a team that plays press man coverage or that does whatever. So that would be my concern with him, is that he's linear fast. He's a good receiver, but does not have contested catch ability. Didn't show necessarily high pointing skills. Doesn't have a well-rounded asset tool bag. And so can you get an amalgamation of a number one receiver from the collection of players you have on the roster? Yes, but that was the hope this year too. So does this mix, this alchemy this year, represent a better opportunity than next year? Let's go through some of the things. You have Amari Evans, who was in a lot of ways game plan specific. Going into the game against Notre Dame, Penn State fans were saying this is a good opportunity for him. It wasn't, because he feasts against zone coverages, and really, I don't want to call him specifically one-trick pony, but they had a specific role for him in the offense. He was in that schematically fragile. I think Ross has more ability to get open against more coverages. And then again, Hudson is an outside receiver who can have some slot versatility, but it becomes, what does Andy Kotelnicki want to do with those pieces, and how does he feature? So the last thing here is going back to Kansas. What he brought to Penn State was full Kansas, which I imagine is what he wanted to do, is continue that iteration and that evolution of his offense. And part of what happened at Kansas was an emphasis on the slot receiver. And so I would say Ross has the opportunity to be that guy if those things are indeed what the plan is. So that's where I want to, that's the groundwork for where I'm starting this offseason. If they were to get another guy, I would think that would be helpful, because I don't right now have this guy wins in every situation possible. And there are certainly projections for both of these guys into either the level or the level of competition.
We need to talk about Tysier Denmark.
Yes.
As changing things when he is available. Look, bottom line is, as of this morning, 10:30, we don't know what Amari Evans and Trey Wallace and Liam Clifford are doing.
Yep.
Right. Now, they haven't said anything publicly to say that they are portaling or not. But if those three guys all come back, what happens? Right.
Right.
How does that work?
Right.
I do think that there's the way that James Franklin, it's interesting. It's a curious dynamic, right? The way that James Franklin talked about the growth of the receivers, partially due to Julian's influence in the lead up to the Orange Bowl, right? The press conference that he held when it was snowing outside and they tore Beaver Stadium down. He was very complimentary of the receivers and how they were complete players. They were becoming complete players. Toughness was, I don't know if he exactly said it, but that's what he was alluding to, that they had gotten better in those areas. Look, there is a trust the process piece of this that I don't know. I don't have the answer because the truth is, he also had to get up on that podium after that Notre Dame game and say, yeah, they tried to get them the ball against Notre Dame in press man coverage
early.
Yes. Exactly. Early.
Yes.
And they decided not to do that anymore because they weren't getting the results that they were looking for.
Yeah. And I would say that is partly on the receivers. They wanted to get the ball to Trey Wallace. And in a couple of contested catch situations, the DB made a great play. The ball had average ball placement. It was not in front. It was a little bit behind where the DB can make a play. And then it becomes, does the receiver make a play? And the receiver did not make a play. So who do you blame? The quarterback throws the ball. And he can fix all the problems. But if he's not fixing all the problems, do you have a player who can fix it on the back end, which is harder?
Correct.
And no, the answer was, and I think that if there's an area where, our buddy Landon Tangwall, I think said, they made zero effort to get the receivers involved on one of his videos. And I think that's that's pushing to an extreme on the concept of that. It's not. I think it's that they abandoned the plan early in games where it wasn't working. And they did not try to work through that throughout the year to give Trey Wallace more opportunities to prove himself. It was a short leash on the receivers. That, I think, to me, is what I saw. And I think if you want to grow and develop, you do need to give guys more opportunities. Amari Evans didn't get a whole lot of opportunities outside of exactly what we described of, hey, it's quarters, he's in the slot, he's going to run a post, boom, touchdown. And that does not allow you. It's the 3-point shooter in basketball that's his role. Stand on the outside and have you're ready to catch and shoot. And so I think there is a growth from that perspective that should happen that needs to happen for this team to evolve next year.
There's shared responsibility. It is a more nuanced conversation. The amount of hate that the receivers have gotten over the year has been overdone, right? However, because some of that is on Drew and some of it is definitely on Andy Kotelnicki, and James Franklin said as much after that Notre Dame game when he alluded to, there were some calls, how we called the game, right? He's talking about that, about moving away from those guys. The thing that I do think is interesting in the aftermath of Notre Dame is I saw Notre Dame, and look, like, my opinion of Riley Leonard is not necessarily important. I didn't think he played that much better than Drew. And what I thought was...
We're going down a real different road with that conversation, because, what
I thought was that he had receivers and targets that made more plays for him than Drew did. And that includes... it's a shared, it was not a good, it's right off the bat, it was not a good pass from Drew to Nick, but Nick can catch that ball, right? Like it's just, again, it's that shared element of sometimes you need someone to make a play for you. It can't always be Drew making a play for everybody else. It has to be
not in that environment where he's not clicking. And so that is, I think, the true tragedy of that moment for Penn State is the quarterback was put off rhythm early by some of these things and then could not get back into rhythm in a game where the defense was making it hard for them. Before we get into that, because we're barreling towards a recap of that, I do want to talk about the rest of it is so perfect in this environment and to talk about receivers and all these things, because it is a perfect example of not having a receiver and how that dichotomy affected the end of the season. I just want to make sure before we move on the portal conversation, I still haven't talked about King Mac. I want to talk about King Mac. This is the problem. And so I think it's great that King Mac came back. I think he's got a great opportunity at Penn State. But this is what I said on the front end, and now this is absolutely true. When you transfer, especially in the spring, you don't have the time to integrate culturally, schematically, and from a talent perspective into a defense. So unless you're unworldly talented and you can just go and be better than everybody else, you're probably going to be at a good football program like Alabama or Penn State. You are going to be in the depth chart, but it will be hard for you to start. That is true now of him at Penn State because he has lost that time in this particular situation. Now the opportunity is more clear here. And there is the opportunity of he's been in the defensive scheme before. They're going to keep things most likely similar to where he was with Tom Allen, but you've just lost that time, that institutional time that builds confidence and trust. And so I think he's going to play this year. But if you were moving to Alabama for your fastest path to the NFL, and as a shortcut to say that, to money, this was a mistake from beginning to end. And so now there has to be an acceleration to correct that. And this is purely from the football perspective. I love his talent and potential. I love his ability, but I think it's going to have to be full steam ahead at work to find your role in this defense again and to find where you fit. With a guy like Dejon Lane, they're very excited about the fact that they have Zakee Wheatley back, the fact that they have Vabu Torre, who we haven't talked about. Maybe it's a year early, maybe it's not. He's a guy that I know people are very excited about. It's not an empty room. And so competition is going to happen. And I'm not saying it's a slam dunk that he's a starter next year, even though I think it is a likelihood. But I hope the best for him because his talent I want to see it. And the frustrating thing is it's been delayed by this whole process.
Yeah, yes and no. Everyone's going to start with a new defensive coordinator. Everybody on the defensive side of the ball. So that's that. He had time with Anthony Poindexter. So the position coach is the same. He's getting back into a room that he already knows. He already knows Zachy Wheatley, right?
Yeah.
I just think the complicating factors of his departure are that it was nuanced. It was a very specific situation. And he tried to take advantage of the opportunity that Alabama presented. Obviously in today's NIL era, there was money involved in that.
Yeah.
And a path to what he thought was playing. Coming back, I think,
it's an easier transition. I don't want to overstate my point. You're right to point these things out.
As these things go, it's an easier transition to come back. And, I think it's just a matter of his want, and I think his want is high. So for Penn State, if you're Penn State, losing him, put it this way, if losing him was a really, really big deal, and it was, especially once KJ went down, it's a really big deal to have him back. And
absolutely,
And I do think that this is an important piece of the conversation that gets lost constantly is physical talent and mental and leadership all have to combine at that position group.
Yeah.
In ways that are unique.
He has two of the three. From what I've seen of him, he has the physical and mental talent to do it. That's absolutely
and then communicating that. Yeah. And then communicating that, right? It's though, to me, that's the feedback that right you have seen, I have seen over the years is I think Anthony Poindexter likes it. I think James Franklin likes it. I think whatever defensive coordinator that has been at Penn State has liked it. They like experienced guys back there.
Yeah.
That helps. It is a huge piece of this. It hurts Penn State. It hurts King Mac that experience this past season was not a shared experience at Penn State.
Yeah.
But it helps Penn State that he still has the 10,000 hours, right? The 10,000 reps.
He's been in football for a time now, and there is he wasn't going to an entirely different defense. Like, say, at a certain point, coverages are coverages. How you play them is, there isn't that much variance to my knowledge. Now, that might be, the defense coordinator might tell you that's the dumbest thing they've ever heard, but, generally there is overlap of teams that King Mac would be going to. Let's talk about the biggest news. We covered Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, as you mentioned. The players staying with a decision to go to the NFL draft. Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Dennis-Sutton, Zachy Wheatley, and Zane Durant. Some big wins for Penn State football. That's as of airing right now at 10:44 on January 14th. There may be more decisions coming. There may be more decisions coming today. But how I don't want to just say how important. I'm going to set you up for the answer. Yeah. How important is it that Penn State retained so many of these players that could have gone to the NFL?
It's important.
No, very good. The end of the.
A couple of things. I felt very validated that Dave Brugler and a couple of the NFL guys yesterday tweeted out something that Penn State, right? So as I was talking about Drew's announcement and his decision, I was talking about there still being a window, depending on what happened through the process of the playoff, for him to still leave. It wasn't a cut and dry, I'm back 100%, no doubt about it statement. And that was not the intention of that statement. So the fact that he did still have a decision to make after reaching the semifinal. Obviously, the semifinal performance changed things a little bit, right? And I still think he was, even if they had won a national championship, I still think that his intention was to return to Penn State. But I think he would have had to think about it harder.
Yeah.
If that is how the path played out. And some of these other guys are in the same.
It's also how they play, how they won. There is this conversation of development and figuring things out. And, the way the season ended, what we just have teased at, which if we get to at the end of here on the end of the show, getting into the game,
that
didn't not only did they lose, it didn't happen. So that is if you have those growth and development things to do and you can return to Penn State and you can do those and you can make yourself a top 5 pick, that is part of the decision. If you make yourself a top 5 pick during those 65 plays, game after game after game, that's also part of the conversation, but that's not how the story played out here.
Yep. No, I agree. To be honest with you, Nick Singleton is kind of the inverse of that, right?
Yeah.
The way he finished the season and the way he finished, I think there might have been a bigger appeal for him to go than maybe there would have been in November.
Just imagine Nick Singleton at the combine, running a 40, and then suddenly somebody's like, this kid's a second round pick. Yep. Whether their momentum and buzz, he's a guy that's going to do really well when that time comes.
He is an athletic anomaly. He's really strong. He's really fast. He does things that other people don't.
Explosive.
The question is, correct. The question is whether or not he can wrangle that into becoming a freak running back, right? Yeah. Because he's obviously so much better today on the complete scale. His pass blocking, his understanding of the game, his toughness, you name it, all of those things are different today than they were when he started. Can he make a guy miss in the third level? Yeah. He has, and I think that he got better at that as the season went on. But also not nothing to point out that sometimes he does go down on the first touch.
Yeah.
Right. And gets tripped up and that kind of stuff. I think that there are areas for him to get better. I think he recognized that. I think Katron Allen's the same deal.
Yeah.
The summer that Katron Allen didn't have last year getting faster is the summer and offseason he will be expected to have this year.
Yeah. For the two guys that we haven't talked about yet, and if you want to get a bigger breakdown on Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, we have a video yesterday from that, a standalone Blue White Illustrated here on the YouTube channel. You can definitely check that out. I think the biggest wins, no, because having your quarterback back is the biggest win.
That's a big win.
Yeah, and having your top 2 playmakers back is a big win. But I guess it's really important on a D-line that was going to lose a lot to retain Zane Durant and deny Dennis-Sutton, so you don't have to fully reload at a position that was your strength of that defense in 2024. So deny Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant, especially Durant on the interior, who was behind Abdul Carter the most impactful, disruptive player on the defense. I can't state it enough that at least one piece is back. And of course, they have to figure out what's going to happen around Zane Durant. So from that perspective of reloading and that side of the defense, the impact of these guys and what's next for the defense, because there's a lot of guys here that are offensive players on this list.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to me, Deny played his best game at Penn State against Notre Dame.
Yes.
That's the stuff that separates. Is he has always been a really good player, and I think he's always been a productive player. That interception should have won Penn State the football game, and that's the moment, right? That's the thing that Abdul brought so much of at times this season. And losing Abdul is going to hurt Penn State a lot. But if you've got another guy waiting in the way, and I'm not going to compare those two, right? Abdul is a special human being. He is a different human being. But Denai is really good.
Yeah, and they really play good differently. That's the thing too, is Denai this has been the conversation since he was a committed 5-star prospect. He's going to win in a different way. And it takes power, length, technique, all of those things. And those get better over time. it's kind of like a late bloomer versus a guy that's going to be, an early developer. Denai has always been a late bloomer. So what is this final iteration, and where does he improve in order to prove to the NFL, I can be a force, a productive player on a defensive line at the next level? He has to me, it's about honing the skills that will make you the best version of yourself and not trying to be something you're not. That's for Denai, that's always been the story.
Yeah. No, I agree. And Zane is equally important. I think these guys can wreck games. That's the deal. That is what you need. I think that Penn State has some guys waiting in the wings who have the potential to become that, but these are fully formed players. And so the parallels of like running it back and trying to get back to the spot that they were just in the semifinal and then advancing and winning a national championship, I think that's realistic because of the experience that these guys have had.
Kyle here says, denying Dennis-Sutton, Zariah Fisher and Max Granville, top 3 defensive ends. The part I want to point out here is Zariah Fisher being a big part of this conversation as a veteran and a guy who, when he was out there, provides positional flexibility and production at the defensive end position, where he's great in space for a defensive end. He's great. I'm not going to say he's going to be an elite zone dropper, but he can do those things that Denai, it's not his strong suit. So having 2 veterans like that, I do think is an important thing. So I guess your expectations for Zariah Fisher this upcoming year, given the injuries he suffered over his career.
Yeah, it's tough. Like I don't know injury when guys have gone through it as many times as he has. It leads you to have a healthy skepticism of getting back. And that's not to be unfair to him. He's been through a lot.
Yeah.
And just keeps coming. He just keeps coming. That is who he is. And so, but if I had to bet on it, I think that Zariah Fisher is going to be pretty good for Penn State when he is healthy and fully back and, able to put it on the field. And certainly there's no greater motivation than like, this is it. This is it for him. So it he is an understated and under-acknowledged piece of the equation that they're going to have for next season.
So I know that this is probably a question better suited to Sean Fitz, who's, laid up with being a little sick right now. But I do want to ask this question because it is important. Is there more work in the portal? Are there more players that can play at Penn State? I haven't been tracking that because I've been doing film breakdown and all these other things. So in terms of the potential to add more players just across the board, let's just zoom out so it's not specific, but like, do you expect Penn State to add more players in the portal, or has that resource been exhausted at this point for the Nittany Lions?
I think it's nearing its end. In terms of the blockbuster guys, I think that the time has come and gone just based on the academic calendar, right? Like to get these guys into school and taking classes. Spring semester already started yesterday, which doesn't preclude them. They can still be active in that space. It becomes more difficult. It becomes less realistic. So they never stop. The process never stops. There's things out there, but I do think it's important to look back at some of the comments that James Franklin has made about like expectations, people asking for them to look into the portal in the spring, right? In that April window. It's just less likely. It's just less.
It's also
realistic.
Specific positions. I think I think that's a critical element because we can point to a guy like Chop Robinson who came in as a third down pass rusher at that point. And I think in the moment early on exceeded expectations in terms of what he was capable of doing in his first season, at least for me. And so you'll be pleasantly surprised if a guy who can come and fill a role and maybe as a long-term player in the spring where you steal a guy, and steal is the wrong word, but something unexpected happens and something falls into your lap. Defensive end is a position where you could find a specialist in the portal. Safety, that's a thinking position. That's a harder position to fill. I would even say, unless you're a freak receiver is even hard because you got to understand the playbook and be in sync with the quarterback. And that takes the chemistry and timing. So there's different positions and different abilities for guys to come in and play in the spring. And I do think it's a very narrow list of what you could find in the portal in the spring to affect the upcoming season. So I guess that's kind of where that's what you made me think of it when you mentioned the spring portal.
Yep.
We got like 4 minutes left in the show, so we're not going to get into a full breakdown of the game against Notre Dame. But I do want to get your thoughts. I'll talk about it tomorrow. I'll say my piece tomorrow, but I want to know what you thought of Penn State's performance against Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl and their loss to end the season. What is the defining story there to you as the narrative expert?
They demonstrated they belonged, for one, and people will say what they want about Notre Dame, and we'll see what happens next Monday, right? If Notre Dame gets smacked and loses by 30 points to Ohio State, then Penn State fans will naturally, I don't know about rightfully, say, oh, Penn State's draw was obscenely easy. This is a paper tiger, whatever. I don't necessarily agree with that. But they demonstrated that, one, they took a lead, but then not closing it, not being able to finish it off, I think is what's going to haunt these guys for a long time. It's just a question of, can they make the improvements with that scar tissue to get it done next time? I struggle with the impossibility of the bar when the bar is only you have to get to the national championship game to do better than you did the season before.
But let's put that into context here as well. There are two truths here, and both can be true. Opportunities, like they had in this particular draw of the college football playoff, don't come around very often, where you do get a favorable path to that championship game. You can't guarantee you'll be back here again next year, so when you have the opportunity, you need to capitalize. But they also got to the Final Four.
Yeah.
So was this season a success? Was this a missed opportunity? The view of 24 in its entirety, how do you look at that as opposed to the pass-fail of win a national championship or not, which is an unrealistic expectation for a place like Penn State that doesn't have the institutional and historic institutional resources of a Notre Dame, I'm sorry, not a Notre Dame, an Ohio State or an Oregon or an Alabama. Like Penn State is in that conversation, but they are not in the conversation of teams that have all the pieces ready and the length of time to create that expectation, but they also have that expectation. So where do you fall in that spectrum?
It's all of it. It's all of it. It was, yes. Was it a successful season for Penn State? Undoubtedly. They finally got to the playoff. Yes, an expanded playoff, but they would have gotten to a 14 playoff as the fourth ranked team. So
yeah,
undoubtedly it is and was the best season that James Franklin has had during his tenure. It was also a missed opportunity because everybody saw that was a beatable Notre Dame team in a team that Penn State through the course of the game demonstrated it could play with and beat.
Yep.
They lost by 3 points. It happens, right? Yeah. Like you don't want that to happen, but it happens. Losing by 3 points with an opportunity to get to the national championship game, at that point, it becomes the one game season that James Franklin rejected throughout the playoff, right? You literally just have to win that one more game.
Yep.
And against Ohio State, it's not the end of the world, but it's damaging to Penn State. It is the plus side of obviously winning a national championship, but also doing it against Ohio State. That combination during a building process of a stadium is huge. Like you're trying to gain momentum. And I think that they did gain momentum in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of people buying into NIL right now. There's a lot of people paying attention that obviously the return of the guys that are coming back, it sets them up to do it again next year and to be competitive next year. But that doesn't change the fact that they're going to be super frustrated. Everybody that's involved in this team for the rest of their lives that they didn't find out. Not that they didn't win, that they'll never know that they were on the doorstep against a team that they demonstrated in the first half they could beat. To have a guy fall down, I mean, how often does that happen? Not much.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To have Denai make that, they made game-winning plays. There were things that happened that put them in a position where they could win the game, and then to not get to overtime. Right. That's going to be scar tissue on Drew for his career. Is at worst, absent an interception there, you're going to overtime. And right. If you can play out all the scenarios. If Notre Dame comes down, runs 4-minute football, kicks a field goal, time expires, game's over because he never got a chance to get the ball back. Okay. Right. That stinks. It's a tough loss. That's hard, but that's different from have the ball 50 seconds left on your side of the field and you throw it into traffic and a guy makes a great play. You can't gloss that over. Guy makes a great play.
Yeah. And I think to the point, if you've seen breakdown of that play on the internet, and they had it pegged what was going to happen. So, Notre Dame was on, from a defensive perspective, this is the only thing I'll say here. Notre Dame made it hard on Penn State. And that in turn made it so Penn State made it hard on themselves. Because when things got difficult, they, on offense, in the passing game specifically, didn't rise to the occasion to overcome that challenge where it wasn't just there for them. It wasn't schemed open. You had to win your individual assignments, and the scheme was also countered. So that is on the coordinator as well, of being predictable in that moment and having not putting your players in the best position to succeed. But it was all of it. It was both of those things. And so the work begins to correct those things, fix those things, and become a different version of yourself that is better and more improved. There's questions about Drew Aller in the chat. There's questions about the receivers that we got through the whole show today. We'll keep talking about those. I have a feeling that none of these things are done as we get through the season, Nate. So thank you for your time today. I want to echo the statements here from Z-Man. Where is it? Anyway, Z-Man says, spot on, Nate. You needed to take a rest and take care of yourself. Everybody came back from Florida with something. Nate is gutting through it, so appreciate you. You are going to have to keep writing over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, though. So what are we talking about this week?
All the stuff, right? I'm tracking a defensive coordinator search, which is always fun. Maybe a little less eventful than people anticipate, right? I'm not going to have a minute-by-minute, play-by-play, but I intend to be on top of it. Like I said yesterday, and we'll say again, everything that happened yesterday, Blue White Illustrated subscribers got a heads up on the day before or hours before it happened. So if you're that kind of Penn State fan and you want to follow at that level and you need to know what's happening, our message board is a very fun place to be right now. It's $1 for a week. I forget the $1. Just come, just join us. Right.
Yeah.
I think that we like for the value of $10 a month over a year, I think it's a good deal. And I would hope that you guys feel that way too.
I'll go a step further, and I want to challenge you guys here, and the people here are the people that are in, right, Nate? Like the people that are watching this show live are the people that have bought into the program, like loving football on this level. And I am eternally grateful that you guys are here supporting us, making all this happen. Your friends aren't. Penn State fans, the depth of it, the shallow, like the pool can be so much bigger. And this offseason, I think, is a big moment for Penn State fans as well, because your team did go to the Final Four. They did get over the hump and put themselves on a national stage where everyone's talking about you. So be excited. Like, you know, obviously I'm stumping for you to follow our coverage, but I'm also saying, like, this is a good football team that brought back all those players that got them to a Final Four. So if you've got friends, tell them about the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel and bluewhiteillustrated.com, because Penn State fans, I think that there is a certain amount of fatigue that has set in, and I don't know if it's warranted at this point in the development of the program. And I think everybody needs to wake up a little bit to, this is fun, and this can be fun if we're all with it together. So that's my stump speech for joining us and helping us grow the crowd, because the most exciting thing, the reason the whiteout is awesome, the atmosphere, everything. It's 107,000 people screaming their guts out, being incredibly passionate. When you get a bunch of people together, things are very exciting. And we'd like that to happen on a grand scale here in the offseason for Penn State football fans, because it's just more fun that way. So for Nate Bauer, I don't know if any of that made sense. I don't know if any of that made any sense. Appreciate you guys here for Nate Bauer. We'll be back tomorrow with more. We're going to get into the recap. I'll give you my X's and O's breakdowns of what happened in the Notre Dame game. What I said post-game, I'm just going to tell you, like, it's frustrating watching the film, because most of that was correct in terms of what happened in the game and how they could have won that game. So we'll get into that tomorrow. We'll talk to you.